Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello learners, welcome to this course on Integrated Marketing Communications, and the lecture title for today is IMC Planning Process. Friends, I am Dr. Bhavneet Bhatti, Assistant Professor, School of Communication Studies, Punjab University. Before we move ahead for today's lecture, let's do a quick recap of all that we learned in the previous lecture. Our previous lecture, Module 3, Lecture 2, revolved around the concept of an agency. We learnt what is an agency structure like, what are the functions of major departments of an agency. We also understood the concept of media planning, selection, budgeting, and scheduling. So after having learnt what is an agency, how it works, we need to now finally concentrate on planning the IMC campaign. Our entire course has laid a strong foundation for telling us that how do you eventually conceptualize, create and produce an IMC campaign. The two lectures in this module are going to be focusing on planning the campaign and then finally creating and executing the campaign. So let's begin our today's lecture titled IMC Planning Process. The objectives for this lecture are going to be: firstly, an introduction into the concept of developing an IMC plan. And secondly, we are going to be familiarized with the concepts of situation analysis and market research. These two concepts lay the foundation for the planning process. Next, we are going to learn a bit about how do you formulate the objectives for a IMC campaign. So let's begin. Friends, the first thing that we need to know today is what is a planning process. Now, planning is the process by which one establishes a series of major decisions related to, firstly, audiences, next, budgets, objectives, and strategy and tactics. Now, we need to know here that what is this planning process and how is it connected to the actual work which is going to be done. Take for instance this figure in front of you. The planning process requires three things. We need to have a solid foundation based on analysis and research. After that, objectives are set. The purpose of putting these objectives is to understand that what is the intended goal of the organization. Where are they actually trying to reach? So our objectives will give us a goal, that where do we intend to reach. The strategy or the planning around strategy is going to tell us how do we reach there. What are going to be the tools that will help us in accomplishing that goal. And tactics, they tell us what is going to be the precise route which is going to be taken to reach towards the goal. So the objectives give you the goal, strategy gives you the direction, and tactics give you the exact route as to where and how will you reach. The planning process comprises these components because it is on the strong foundation of these plans that a final IMC campaign will be generated. Friends, we are also going to now learn that how these sequential steps are going to be important for us. The integrated marketing communications planning process includes sequential steps and determining the role of each element of the promotional mix in the campaign. If you remember, we have already finished our modules which were dealing with the promotional mix, and we understood that advertising, sales promotion, publicity, PR, these are all the elements of a promotional mix which help in making an IMC campaign. So this planning process is going to tell you that which ingredient will you take in what quantity to be able to make a flavorable IMC campaign. Three things that we are going to deal with today is situation analysis, preparation of objectives, and developing an IMC plan. Like I told you, this module is going to deal with planning, creation, and production. In today's lecture, we are dealing with planning. Under planning, we are going to discuss situation analysis and formulation of objectives, which will together help us in developing the IMC plan. So the first part of the planning process is situation analysis. As the name suggests, situation analysis deals with a good amount of market research and analysis. You are going to lay down a strong foundation, and this strong foundation is based on a very authentic, credible research data. If I have to make plans, I must be familiar with the ground reality. Situation analysis familiarizes me with ground reality, and it does so with the help of research and analysis. Thus, this becomes credible, authentic information which lays a strong foundation. While planning an IMC campaign, the starting point is research and analysis. And what do we analyze? What do we research? The present situation and the background information. For example, friends, if I want to plan an image building campaign for an MNC, I must be very familiar with the current situation of the MNC, the products that it makes, the number of years that it has in operations. Maybe during my planning, maybe during my research, I realized that this is the 100th year of the organization. I could have a very good chance to make an image building campaign around the centenarian celebrations of that company. So this is to tell you that the present situation and background of a company can be very useful in planning a successful campaign. Situation analysis focuses on the factors that are significant to make a promotional strategy, and they involve several components. Let us further see what all does situation analysis deal with. Situation analysis has several components. We are going to be analyzing the situation vis-a-vis organization, its competitors, consumers, market, and product. So here in front of you, you have this flow chart which tells you that situation analysis can be done only when you know you are going to analyze the situation vis-a-vis what components. If I ask you to conduct research, until and unless I give you some objectives, it's going to be difficult for you to have research. Similarly, when you conduct situation analysis, you should be familiar as to what you are analyzing. Organizational analysis, competitor analysis, consumer analysis, market analysis, and product analysis. Now we are going to take them up one by one so that it is further clear to you that how is situation analysis conducted. Friends, let's first begin with organizational analysis. Can you give yourself a moment and think, what is it about the organization that you could analyze? Maybe the kind of mission it has, maybe the overall objectives that it goes by. There could be several things about an organization that you might wish to analyze. Let's see what all does organizational analysis include. Number one, company's sales and profits. You really need to know if the company is on an upswing, is it on a downswing, what are the challenges ahead of company. Secondly, you need to look at company's mission and objectives. Any kind of marketing communication objectives will be made vis-a-vis the organizational objectives. If the organization wants to be known as a brand leader, then your marketing communication objectives will be made accordingly. If the company wants to be known as a loyal, as a growing, as a aggressive, as a friendly, whatever the company decides to portray itself as, the marketing communication objectives are going to go hand in hand with that. So it's important to know what is the company's sales and profits. Second, it is important to know the mission and objectives of the organization. Thirdly, it's important that we are familiar with various products and services being offered by the company. Sometimes a single brand offers a range of products, and we are not even familiar. And if we are given the name of the brand behind a particular company, we are sometimes more interested. For instance, there are several brands which belongs to Coca-Cola company. We might not be aware. The moment we know that such and such juice or such and such drink belongs to the Coca-Cola company, there is a certain kind of credibility, loyalty that gets attached. So a marketing communication specialist, when undertaking an organizational analysis, must be familiar with three things: its sales and profits, mission and objectives, and the various products and services being offered by that. Another thing that a marketer should know is what are the resources available to you, both in terms of manpower and finances. Once you have known about the organization, you should then delve into knowing about what kind of campaigns has this organization done in the past. After you have the full profile of the organization, you could then delve into looking at the marketing or advertising campaigns that the organization undertook during the past times, and then you could look at their success or impact. The second part of the analysis is competitor analysis. Let's face the reality that we are making campaigns for organizations who are not living in an isolated environment. There are several competitors offering same brands at maybe more economical prices. So you need to be aware of who your competitor organizations are, what are they offering, what are their communication strategies. Let's look at what all you need to know about the competitors. Direct and indirect competitors of the brand. You must be aware of who is going to be offering the same product in the market for you. Secondly, you need to look at the real and perceived distinctions from the competitor. For instance, you have Maggi noodles, you have Yippee noodles. So both of them are offering same product. But are there any unique differences of Maggi noodles from Yippee? We need to look at that. Then analysis of competitors' marketing communications. We might be making a campaign and we could see that our competitor has already created a campaign which has clicked with the audiences very well. So we should be aware of what are our competitors' marketing and communication strategies. Next, in situation analysis, friends, we are going to deal with consumer analysis. Who are you making these campaigns for? Who is your audience? If you are not aware of the patterns or likes or dislikes or profiles of our consumers, our campaigns might not be hitting the right notes. Let us see what do we need to know about the consumer. First of all, we need to identify both customers and consumers. We need to analyze the consumer profiles, customer profiles. Analysis of their profiles means their demographic and psychographic profiles. Demographics, like include their age, gender, their locations, their geographic background, so on and so forth. Psychographic profiles means their likes, their dislikes, their desires, their motivations, what motivates them to buy a certain brand. Analysis of consumer needs and motives. This is something that we dealt during our lecture on consumer behavior. Once again, we need to understand that while you are profiling a consumer, you need to also understand what are the motivations through which a consumer buys your brands. Next, we should be very aware of their consumption patterns. Why do they buy a brand? How do they consume a brand? What makes them repurchase your brand again and again? So consumer analysis and perceptions are again closely linked. What do they think about your brand? What is the perception of your brand in the minds of your consumer? These insights into a consumer will go a long way in making your campaign a success. So the first part of situation analysis was organizational analysis, and the second part is consumer analysis. Friends, the next part is market analysis. Market forces have a very important role to play in the planning of an integrated marketing communications campaign. First thing is the sales distribution pattern. How are the sales distributed? How does the marketing forces revolve around the same? Then determining the population segments most likely to respond to the company. We all know that amongst our customers, there are certain segments, and we also understood that markets are segmented on the similarity in certain populations, certain characteristics. So amongst those various segments, which one is going to be the most promising, that is determined, and plans are made accordingly. Then we also need to identify and analyze the opportunities that the market is providing us. Finally, we should also be tracking the changes in the political, regulatory, economic, and technological forces. Several forces change the way markets behave. Take, for example, the current pandemic situation of COVID-19. It has absolutely changed the way people are making their purchases. When the markets went under a lockdown, our buying patterns moved automatically towards online shopping. Our ways of consuming things changed. We changed the way we were placing orders, purchasing things, trying things, returning things. So the current socio-economic, technological challenges can actually change the way a consumer looks and purchases at a brand. So always keep in mind that market forces are strong enough to change the way you communicate with your consumer. Always track the changes in the marketplace. The next component of situation analysis is product analysis. While making a product analysis, we should keep in mind the following pointers. The first thing to keep in mind is product attributes. We must be familiar with what the product has to offer, and these offerings need to be connected with the consumer needs. It is important to check that whether the product being offered is fulfilling the needs of the consumers. While doing this analysis, we must also keep in mind the USP of the product. An analysis needs to be done on how well the USP has been incorporated in the marketing communications and how well is it connecting to the consumer's needs. Also, we need to be aware of the distribution networks and channels and the kind of impact that they have on availability or delivery of a product. All this analysis about the product becomes extremely useful in the integrated marketing communications, and this analysis becomes an integral part of the situation analysis and market research. Friends, after situation analysis is completed, the next step in IMC planning process is formulation of objectives. So let's begin by looking at how do we define an objective. An objective can be defined as the goal or aim or end result that one is seeking to achieve. And this goal or aim is simply written in a statement for the case of marketing communications in a way that can be measured later on also. Objectives also act as a guidance for achieving the results. They give you a direction, they give you something to concrete to achieve. In case of IMC campaigns, the objectives need to be in sync with the overall corporate objectives of an organization. Regarding formulation of objectives, we must keep in mind that step models can be extremely important and beneficial if we formulate our objectives according to them. One of these models is the IDA model. IDA model can give us sequential steps which can help us in achieving our marketing communication objectives. It gives you the stages which a potential consumer must pass through in order to adopt your product. Let's see how IDA can be incorporated in formulation of objectives. IDA stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. Now friends, let us take an example and see how this step model becomes beneficial in formulation of objectives. For instance, if my product is still at a launch or a post-launch stage, my marketing communication objective could be to create awareness about the availability of this brand. If my brand is already made a place in the market, but I want to get more people interested in purchasing my brand, my objective would be to increase the levels of interest of target market in my brand. The next stage would be to be able to generate desire for purchase amongst the target audiences. And the final marketing communication objective could be to create sales or to increase the purchase of product. So ideally, these are the 4 stages we expect our customers to go through, and hence these 4 stages are extremely beneficial in formulation of IMC objectives. Let's look at another step model which helps us in this. This is the DAGMAR model. DAGMAR stands for Defining Advertising Goals for Measured Advertising Results. Now, although this model is important in measuring advertising effectiveness, but it is extremely beneficial in IMC communications also. The core benefit of DAGMAR is that while we are defining our objectives, we should write those statements in a manner that would be later on becoming measurable. Instead of writing to generate awareness, if I write to increase awareness level amongst youth, I have then written an objective which can be later on actually measured. I have a baseline data, I have an end line data, I can compare the two and I can see if I was able to increase awareness levels or not. So always keep in mind that while framing objectives, it is in our hands that whether we will be able to write an objective which later on will be measurable or not. Let's move further and see another important concept in formulation of objectives. Friends, while writing the statements for objectives, it's important that we keep in mind 2 aspects, the sales aspect and the communication aspect. No doubt our end result is going to be pushing the sales, but communication is equally important. So formulation of objectives needs to be done keeping in mind the need to boost communication and the need to boost sales. Another pointer that can be kept in mind is use of action words or doing words. Rather than using passive voice, you should use active doing words in your objectives that become more achievable. Friends, the next concept in formulation of objectives is the concept of SMART objectives. These SMART objectives do not refer merely to well-written objectives. In fact, they throw light upon the characteristics that an objective should possess if it is going to be achieving success. SMART objectives. SMART here stands as an acronym for the following characteristics which an objective should possess. Let's look at these objectives one by one. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, relevant, targeted, and timed. If your objectives possess these qualities, they are definitely SMART objectives and can promise to achieve more results. But the challenge here lies as to how to make your objectives into SMART objectives. Let's look at each of these characteristics and learn practically to change our vague objectives into SMART objectives. The first component is specific. Objectives should be clear, precise, and they should be directional. Directional means that they should be hinting you towards a certain direction, which way to move forward. They should bear specific results. For instance, you should be very clear and specific whether you are looking at generating awareness or whether you are looking at changing perceptions or increasing sales. You should be very specific as to what you are trying to achieve. Again, keep in mind that specificity is vis-a-vis vagueness and ambiguity. Let me give you an example over here. For instance, you want to create popularity for your brand. Rather than writing an objective to make a brand more popular, your objective should be specific to make the brand more popular vis-a-vis the perception of audiences for brand image. This will tell the marketer what is really expected to be achieved and how. Let's move on to the next component of SMART objectives. Measurable. As we just discussed in the case of DAGMAR model, objectives should possess a quantified measurement statement. For example, when we say to generate 80% aided awareness, we are looking at a population in which 80% people will be able to recognize your brand with some aid or clue. Using this quantified measurement in the statement helps you in later on measuring your results vis-a-vis this statement. The third component is achievable. Objectives should be feasible and achievable. We should have enough resources in hand, and while framing the objectives, we should have in mind as to which resources will help us in achieving these objectives. The next component is realistic. If we set too high targets without realizing the feasibility of these objectives, unrealistic objectives, when remain unfulfilled, can lead to demoralization. And if you lack resources, you should be setting objectives within limits only. The next component of SMART objectives is relevance. Objectives should be appropriate for the task at hand. For instance, if you are wanting to improve sales and you are making an objective about improving perceptions, it might indirectly lead to sales, but this is a rather unspecific and irrelevant objective at the moment. So you should focus on task at hand, and then the objective should be framed vis-a-vis that task at hand. Also keep in mind that relevance can be checked when your marketing communication objectives are in sync with your overall organizational or corporate objectives. The next feature is targeted. Objectives should be related to your target audience. That is, whom are you trying to reach? Are your objectives being able to fulfill that criteria? If there are more than one target groups, we should look at specific objectives for specific target groups. For instance, to create awareness amongst middle-aged population, to create popularity amongst youths who are already aware. So your different audiences can have different objectives to be achieved. The last component of SMART objectives is timing. Objectives should have a time frame as to when they are expected to be achieved. If you do not define an end of objective timing, you will have vague objectives that remain unfulfilled forever. So therefore, putting a time limit on your objectives is very important, especially in the case of IMC campaign. This helps in timely completion and evaluation of the campaign. So friends, this was how to turn your vague objectives into SMART objectives when you are formulating the objectives. After the formulation, there are also a few steps required in planning process. The first one is determination of target audience. Choosing who should be targeted for marketing communications is a very vital part of planning process. If you do not identify and segment your audiences at the beginning, you will have very vaguely reaching marketing communications. So market definition, market segmentation helps you in strategizing further marketing communications. The next step is budget allocation. Now, budget allocation does not merely talk about finances. It actually talks about resources and how those resources should be allocated. Next is strategy. Strategy provides the direction for all those involved in the flow of communications. We have already tackled with strategic planning, and we had discussed during our lecture on strategic planning that there are a few core strategies like brand value strategy, brand positioning strategy, USP strategy. So while planning, you should have in mind what is that strategy that you are going to carry forward, and your objectives, once formulated, give way to the choice of strategies. After strategies, the next thing in hand is tactics. Specific activities and events that are going to be conducted to achieve your goals are known as tactics, and they can be understood as elements of marketing communication mix also. For example, friends, let us say my objective is to increase 70% target audience awareness regarding brand. My strategy is that I am going to increase awareness with the appeal of what's new in the market. My tactic is that I am going to have a celebrity endorser who is going to take this brand to the households. I am going to use sales promotion, and I am also going to have contests on awareness quiz about the brand. So I have an objective I have a strategy in line and tactics that are going to give me an exact guide route into how to achieve that goal. That's how the planning process works. The final stage after planning is implementation. Implementation is threefold: creative implementation, media implementation, and production implementation. This is the part where production begins, and that's going to be our next lecture. However, before moving on to production, let us first quickly sum up what we have learned in today's lecture. We have learned today the steps of planning process, and to sum up this, let us go through them one by one again. The IMC campaign planning process begins from situation analysis. Situation analysis deals with components like organizational analysis, competitor analysis, marketing analysis, consumer analysis, product analysis. Then we move on to formulation of objectives. After that, we have strategy and tactics to be finalized, and then we will move on to the production stage. So friends, today we learned the IMC planning process. We learned situation analysis and its elements. We also learned how to formulate objectives and how to convert them into SMART objectives. Finally, we learned the steps in campaign planning process. The task that you can do today is think of a hypothetical product, any, that you would once want to launch, and then think that while doing situation analysis for your product launch, what are the factors that you will keep in mind. You can take the aid of today's lecture in jotting down your situation analysis for a hypothetical product. I hope this will give you an insight into the practicality of situation analysis. So friends, that brings me towards the end of today's lecture. These are the references and readings for today's lecture. I hope you've learned something of value today, and we are going to meet soon for the next lecture on campaign productions. Thank you so much.